Before I say anything else, I'm going to acknowledge, of course, that we are here on the unceded lands of the Gadi people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I express my deep gratitude for the ongoing custodianship of country, as well as, of course, community and culture. And in paying those respects, I want to acknowledge Josh Shai, cultural educator, artist, performer, for his Dig Sweep this morning, which started us off today. I want to acknowledge Jonathan Jones, amazing artist who festival attendees will be hearing from later in the week. I want to acknowledge Jess Herder, adjunct lecturer here who chaired the last session, and our three amazing First Nations speakers, Coolin, Peter and Daryl. And I also want to extend my respect to Aboriginal and First Nations people here in the room this evening. I'm Nicole Gurran. I'm Professor of Urban and Regional Planning here at the University of Sydney, and I direct the Henry Halloran Urban and Regional Research Initiative and, of course, this Festival of Urbanism. Just to say for a moment about the initiative at the University of Sydney, we're a cross-disciplinary research centre with a mission to bring together the different bodies of knowledge and different research disciplines in our university and other universities in dialogue with the community, with practice, with industry, with policymakers, creatives and the wider public. And one of the ways that we do that is through conversations and events such as the one that we're having tonight. The festival itself, which we're beyond our 10th year now, brings people together around the important challenges that face urban and regional communities. And it's really a way of surfacing important and sometimes actually really challenging ideas. This year's flagship memorial lecture, to be delivered by the extraordinary Tina Havelock Stephens, and followed by a panel conversation with Tina, Michael Dagostino and Dr. Inya Moore, invites us to consider the sublime and the regenerative power of art in engaging people and community in the public realm. In a moment, I'm going to invite Professor Donald McNeill, Dean of Architecture, Design and Planning, to introduce Tina properly. But first, I just want to give you a flavour of how the evening's going to run. Tina will deliver her keynote, and I've had a bit of a preview of it. It's fantastic. And then we're going to allow her time to catch her breath while I invite some observations and some reflections from our two eminent panellists. And let me introduce them now. Oh, and you will have noticed we're all ready for a reception afterwards. We will have a bit of Q&A with our panellists. I want to thank you all for submitting, those of you who have submitted questions in advance. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible, and we'll have a bit of time in the room for a couple of questions too. And then a reception afterwards. So let me briefly introduce Michael and Enya, and then I will invite Professor McNeill up to introduce our keynote speaker. So Michael Dagostino is director of the Chau Chak Wing Museum, and he's had more than 25 years in the contemporary, of course, here we are in the Chau Chak Wing Museum, and he's had more than 25 years in the contemporary art sector. He's had numerous important leadership roles, including as inaugural director of Parramatta Artist Studios, where he developed an innovative hub for emerging artists to extend their professional practices locally and internationally, and director of the incredible Campbelltown Arts Centre, which is a flagship cultural venue for contemporary and multidisciplinary art, and I'm sure it's familiar to many of you here. Michael has also been chair of Artspace. Incidentally, we've got an event at Artspace on Friday lunchtime. Please join. And he's held board roles on numerous other important bodies such as Accessible Arts, FBI Radio, Sydney's Writers' Festival, and leadership positions on New South Wales State Government Arts and Cultural, the New South Wales State Government Arts and Cultural Advisory Committee, the Western Sydney Arts Alliance and the Sydney Cultural Network. And Dr. Enya Moore is a researcher, educator and design practitioner. Where's Enya? There you are. Her work explores the cultural ecosystems that support creative, community-engaged practices. With a background in design research, cultural festivals and public space, she's particularly interested in how cultural practices emerge within communities rather than through top-down initiatives. Enya is a lecturer in design here at the University of Sydney and a member of the collective Broken Fields. Her writing has appeared in the Journal of Design History, the Journal of Design History, Design and Culture, and in numerous publications, including Frame, Icon, and InDesign. And really, Dr. Moore is an example of the really multicultural, multidisciplinary, we are multicultural as well, but the multidisciplinary talent that we've got in the School of Architecture, Design and Planning. And with that, I'd like to invite Professor Donald McNeill to introduce our keynote speaker.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm always very excited whenever the Arthur Denis Winston Lecture comes round. A little bit of a background on who Arthur Denis Winston was. Born in 1908 in Liverpool, England, and after a fascinating career in British cities, was appointed to the Foundation Chair in Town and Country Planning, as it was known then, at the University of Sydney, then the first in Australia. Robert Freestone has written about Winston in the Australian Dictionary of Biography, and I encourage you to take a quick look if you're interested. Winston's experience and interest in cities was widespread, ranging from architecture to urban design to city planning and urban sociology. Under Winston, the university introduced a Masters of Town and Country Planning in 1956, and his leadership shaped many generations of urbanists in post-war Sydney. So we commemorate his work in our school through various prizes, student prizes, and the Memorial Lecture, which is tonight's event. Someone who studied in Liverpool, worked in Southampton, then landed in Sydney, I'm also intrigued by the trajectory that he followed. However, it also brings to mind that for many who teach and practice urban design and planning, both the university and the planning profession have long been part of the Australian and the New South Wales colonial system. I acknowledge we're on unceded land and acknowledge, of course, the significance that urban planning and urban planners have long zoned and rezoned that land. So tonight we're both recognising the start of formal planning education in Australia while recognising the deep, long history of custodianship that went before and continues today. There are many in the profession who are looking for different pathways, and that's one of the most live discussions that we have in the school today. When I was talking to my colleague Michael Bounds earlier, we've seen different Winston lectures. We think this is the first that's been done by a public artist, and that's particularly exciting for us. Tina Havelock Stephens lives and works in the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and our multidisciplinary art practice is really evident when we're looking for speakers tonight in the amazing work under Martin Place that I hope many of you will have seen. I think in the context of the completion of Sydney Metro and its many wonderful public art processes, that experience of walking through a pedestrian tunnel, between platforms, Martin Place station's not always the most welcoming or placeful places in Sydney, is one of the closest, I would say in my own humble experience, one of the closest integrations of art with infrastructure that you can find really in any city. And if you've not walked through it or spent time and dawdled in it, spent some time just engaging with it, put it on your agenda for a weekend or an after work thing to do, because it's one of the most striking things I think you'll see in central Sydney. I won't say too much more because I think Tina's got a lot to cover in her own talk, but she has another installation coming up in that Gallery of New South Wales called two exclamation marks, not question marks. And that's something which is going to open in the summer as well, so that'll be another date for your diary, and you can do the two things in one short walk.
The tunnel's not actually on.
Oh, okay.
That's it. I'll talk about it.
All right, okay. But Tina will take us through some of her work. I'd like you to welcome her to the stage. Thank you very much.
Hit the right thing. Okay. Hello, I'm Tina, in case you didn't know. And before I'd start, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging as well. So look, I don't want to talk through everything that I've got here. I've got images, music, video, documentation. I haven't done one of these before, which I know you're not supposed to say at the beginning of keynotes, but I have just kind of thrown everything together. So by the end of this chat, you should have an idea of my process and how I connect to site, how I see site, and then how I produce the work. I haven't always been I'm from a family of painters, but I do have a background in documentary and mainly sort of observational documentary. I also played in bands for a long time, which sort of gave me insight into the power that's inherent in live action, its consequences, seeing audience reaction. I think obviously working in documentary, you have that as well. I also worked in social services as a youth worker and worked in Indigenous communities in Northern Territory and Cape York through the 2000s. So I've had quite a bit of lived experience, I suppose. I did go to university. I was at UTS in the 90s, but I studied communications and majored in cultural studies, philosophy, and also did film and sound. So there's a whole mix of things going on in my brain. When I was doing, this lived experience being very varied, I suppose it's like an active learning, and it has impacted my art practice, which is extremely multidisciplinary. Like, I go for everything. I will paint, do sound, perform. I do a lot of performance, take photographs. I've been a cinematographer and a producer and a director and all those sort of things. And some of the examples of the docos that I worked on was Hitting Home with Sarah Ferguson, which actually won a Walkley. I was her producer. So that was all about domestic violence. Then I've done a lot of hospital shows, so I'm actually a faux doctor as well. I'm quite good in those situations. Someone faints at a party, come and get me. And then I did silly things like Real Housewives of Melbourne. I was the Gina Whisperer, but I only wanted to do one series, one of those. And then Bondi Rescue, and all of these sort of happened in between my art projects. So I'd go off, work on these TV shows, and everyone would go, see you on the next series? I'd go, no, I'm going to go and make an artwork, or I'm going to go and drum underwater, or I'm going to go and do something else. So anyway, my own documentaries there was one about teenagers and one about Australian nationalism. So I got to travel to Gallipoli for Anzac Day in 2008 and went all over the place. Anyway, as a curator friend once said to me, your work is all about the humans, and I think it is. So today I'm just going to focus on two public artworks that have been commissioned over the last 4 years. One's a soundscape sculpture, which was at Sydney Football Stadium, out the front of the stadium on Moore Park Road. And then a lighting work at Martin Place, which is this one. And after talking about the first, it should give you a good idea about my process. That's me. I always put magpies in my sound works. In the public art context, sound can be leveraged as a regenerative tool rather than a nuisance. So it reduces the idea of noise into kind of a positive soundscape. And I guess this background in doco and just how I am contributes to a certain reading of the general psyche and social psychologies, and I work intuitively, and I am very interested in social cohesion. People having a common experience does bring a sense of joy, belonging and well-being. And what I'm interested in is that people might become more connected to themselves and one another, and I aim for a universal appeal that transcends identities. You've got a very broad audience when you do public art, so it's about creating a positive space. I don't want it to be worrying at all. If it's sound, I've got to be very careful that it's not kind of grating or annoying. I'm a bit of a peacenik, so I try to give people a bit of a circuit break in the day just to have a listen, as well as having a reflection of history and really just a bit of magic. I'm not really who knows, AI will probably affect me at some point in my life, but at the moment I'm into the magic that already exists, and I seem to be able to be finding a lot of that so far. Also, both works I'm talking about today have seating, which means that the listener has the ability to sit and listen, experience, be able to spend time, and I think that's an important option. It's okay, it's made so you can walk through it, but it's also made so you can sit and listen. And I think, I'm like that with my video works as well. Like, got to have a bench. Whenever I'm organising something, I'm like, nah, there's got to be a bench in here, because I just want the opportunity for people to actually sit and take it in, rather than it being sort of, ouch, my back hurts or whatever. Anyway, I was really pleased to be invited to contribute a proposal for the Sydney Football stadium. People can be a bit confused by my multidisciplinary tag, and so I was actually really happy that they'd gone, that person can do a really good sound installation for public art. So while I was developing the proposal, I went to a presentation on site at Sydney Football Stadium, and they had the sort of demountable offices during construction, and we were shown various images of the stadium that helped me sort of get the lay of the land, and then I had to pitch for it. So I had no idea what I was going to do when I got there, and plenty of ideas by the time I left a few hours later. And I often work with sites through image, through experimental documentary and photography, and sound, like drumming spaces and field recordings, and therefore it was a no-brainer to consider drumming the stadium and to record it from all angles. So basically, it's about drumming space. I mean, everywhere has a story, and I'm into sort of charged spaces, I suppose. And this was charged because it was brand new, the land that it's on. So I was going to have to go into a sort of a full kind of research, go into the research mode. What I'm going to do is just play 1 minute of the work that I won the Blake Prize with, just to give you an idea of how I sort of deal with sight. You can't hear the drums in this. I played this to someone recently. They went, but you can't hear the drums, but it's okay. Okay, so that's that. So seated around this Moreton Bay fig tree. So this was like one of the images that I was given, okay? So it's like, it's a nice round tree there. That's the Moreton Bay fig tree on Moore Park Road, number 125. And from this I had to sort of, that was the starting point to sort of think about this. Anyway, so in order to make the soundscape, I decided to weave a poetic sonic journey of integral threads. The work would speak to moments in the site's history, so that's where the research is required, and be a homage to the monumental Moreton Bay fig tree known as Tree 125. In and around core streams, layers would be arranged from field recordings, natural ambient sounds including bats and other animals, and the wind in the trees above. I decided that embedding the speakers inside the two seating sections to be located beneath the canopy was a respectable, non-invasive way to consider the tree. This would also make for a localised, immersive 3D experience. So I think whoever I was up against, they didn't put the speakers inside the seats. I think it was all sort of over the tree and everything. So obviously this kind of idea of this kind of vibrating a sound portrait that was sort of also vibrating of the area was something that really kind of people liked. The concept gained its layers as I read upon the history of the area in which the stadium stands. I imagine the traditional owners on Bidjigal Gadigal country before colonisation, their feet on their land. I read how they played Man Grook, which was a type of football on the commons in the area. So that was most certainly an inspiration for AFL. So the commons is like where Moore Park is. And I wanted to acknowledge that connection as a very important part of the site. It's extremely important to know that I was being conceptually respectful to its long history, and I consulted with several Aboriginal colleagues and friends with connections to the La Perouse community, which is always very important to make sure that you are, being respectful and getting everything Right. So the solo drum performance in the stadium was an example of my practice, drumming as a means of exploring and connecting with place, and this spontaneous composition will channel the power and visceral excitement of the stadium site through deep, resonating, reverberant sound. As I'm also interested in thresholds, it was natural for me to perform in a massive construction site and ultimately be the first performative noisemaker in there, apart from construction worker-driven machinery. And I certainly don't mind improvising to transformative ordered chaos. So I just actually remembered that I had this footage. I had a friend come and shoot some bits. And so I found the footage, so I thought I'd just make up a little video. And I think the thing is, you know, I am talking to you really as an artist, like I'm not, that's all I know. And process is really important. I mean, public art, you've got a lot of people that you're working with, besides your stakeholders and all that sort of thing. You've got yourself, your engineers, your tradies, your meaningful collaborators, you know, and it's kind of like a, you know, it's a holistic approach, really. Good work will breed good work. I think that's pretty simple. I don't know why some people can't seem to figure that out, but public art is all about teamwork. You can't do it by yourself. And this was like all during, like, it was a weird time. It was around early 22. They were running late because of COVID. There was a lot of rain. I mean, you think we've got a lot of rain now? We do, but we had a lot of rain back then too. And so they were running late with this. So we really, you know, we were up against with sort of COVID weather and access and all that sort of stuff. So I thought I'd put a bit of funny stuff in here too.
There it comes.
Imagine. So we had them up like area, they were everywhere. So, you know, Matt gave me a little surf. That's all fun. So we took everything in, the PA, everything. I love the 19 days till Easter. That was supposed to get the workers hurrying up. I don't think they... That's Bob, who I work with a lot. Oh, shit. Is it? Knows how to record drums. It sounds amazing. Amongst other things. It's just, yeah, it sounds huge. Yeah, don't. No. Are you good to go? Note to self, not too busy.
Give it time to breathe. Is that
Yeah, because the echo, like the reverb is crazy in there, so you'd hit it, just goes. So if you play too much, like I just played in the Tank a couple of weeks ago too, in the art gallery to do a recording. You've just got to. You got to simplify because it's too noisy. So it affects you. You play to the space. That's Tony Albert's seating sort of in process there. So this is drumming to William Barton. This was the one we actually used in the work. All so there was a couple of, there was all the various layerings through it. So for the football session, to get the kind of Indigenous feet on the ground, local personality, Billy McPherson sorted members from the Redfern All Blacks for us. And we started, don't have a photo of that, unfortunately, but we recorded focusing on the passing, kicking of the ball, and this was sort of, a bit of a way of doing that Indigenous connection to land by way of feet, the feet on the ground. And the sounds became integral to a recognition of place in all its integrity. So they hold that sort of poetic potential of human connection to country bodies and land mingling. This image is of acclaimed Indigenous composer and virtuoso performer William Barton. So he responded on site at Lachlan Swamp in Centennial Park with his powerful improvised vocalising. So it's like, I go to places and I drum them, so I was just like, okay, I'll just take everybody to these places and that I charged. And he was fantastic. So this thread evokes the tale of Busby's Bore, which was Sydney's second water supply, built on the labour of hundreds of convicts, which extended from Centennial Park under the Sydney Football Stadium site through to Hyde Park. And they built that after they fouled up the tank stream, so it was like this kind of gravity feed. And it was an ambitious aquatic network, and it still exists today as a reverberating chapter, really, of the site's history. So it was crazy to think what was lying underfoot. I'd initially imagined that William's vocals would come from inside a tunnel, because in Victoria Barracks you can actually look down into it, but I was informed there was limited oxygen, so we didn't do that. Didn't think we'd go with that. Recording William was a gentle day amongst the trees and bats at Lachlan Swamp. Bob wielded mics and William lulled me into a timeless, skin-tingling atmosphere, vocally responding to the swamp, and I got shat on by a bat, which I considered good luck. A lovely process of free-spiritedness. Bob and I spent a bit of time at the swamp. It was intriguing listening to the animal kingdom vocalising and the change in what species became the loudest at various times as the sun went down. The bat colony always seemed busy, the cockatoos screeched in, invisible crickets called out, and there were other birds, frogs and swans. So, sorry, they stop abruptly. There we are. Fun. It was really fun. Victoria Barracks, which houses the Australian Army Band headquarters, is literally based across the stadium. It's across on Moore Park Road. And the band historically used the cricket ground to practice and perform. So I got in touch with the band Sergeant Major Ray, and he generously set up the introductions, and we recorded at the barracks. And I requested for them to only play tunes the band would have played in the early 1900s when they were on the cricket ground. So that was a pretty wild day too. They rehearsed, and so we had a lot to choose from. And, they even incorporated, we had their friendly bugler with the last post, which sort of referenced Anzac Parade. So I whacked that in there too. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. I'm just going to play this bit because this audio is like one of my favourite bits of it. So it's got the harmonics of the marching band, it's got the football sounds, the passing, and it's got... I was walking my dog and I was like, where are these people going? Because I live in Surrey Hills, and everyone's like, Sydney Swans, Sydney Swans. So I went up there and I actually had all my recording stuff. And I managed to get Buddy Franklin's 1000th goal. Like I just happened to capture it. Like suddenly I was standing there and my VU meter went, and I was like, oh wow, that's good. So you can hear that in this too. Might be nice to turn this up a bit. This is quite beautiful. It's like
Next. Come around here, Roy. Lily. Oh, you want to come this way?
Yeah. Mine. Yep, it's mine. Dad.
Sorry, they're just abrupt. You'll have to go listen to it. That's the speaker mesh. And there it is. So it's installed under the tree. Certain sounds pop out of the speakers like treats. And visitors experience a dramatic and immersive sound field, as well as the recording offering a contrasting variety of sonic perspectives and spaces that listeners experience, as I said before, shifts on their position, depending on their position on the benches. And hopefully visitors will pass through this place once again, a commons, to experience the sonic and vibrational portrait inspired by the site. I hope listening and feeling will create a visual landscape and an understanding of place, all shaded by a knowing Moreton Bay fig tree. By activating this important place, I hope renewed connections are forged, evoking the ritual and spectacle that's always been a part of its story. And then there was this. So this is probably the one that, have people experienced this? Has anyone been in here? Yeah, okay. So unfortunately, it's not on anymore. So it was on for a year and then it got flicked. And I don't know what's in there at the moment. I think it's not an artist, they've said to me. So look, it'll come back at some point, but yeah, and we might get into this a bit when we sit down and talk about sort of the vulnerability of sound. But anyway, we'll just talk about this. So I guess what I wanted to do with that sort of first section is just kind of, it's about connecting to site and then going into production. And so obviously I followed a very similar methodology for this. Most space has sound and light, but I walked into this and I was just like, wow, this is going to be like magic. I can turn this into magic. So a very similar methodology, but also with light this time, okay? So we started with the sound and then we kind of went to the lighting. Murugillugu, which is what it's been called, means path of light. It's an ever-evolving sound and light composition, and I used a randomising algorithm that results in unique outcomes. Wasn't AI, but it was a randomising kind of algorithm so that people's experience of the work will never be the same. Because, you've got pedestrians, and pedestrians are very, people going to work, they're going to get that 8 o'clock train and they're going to be walking through that at every moment. So you needed that to change. I didn't want them to go, oh, not this again, the experience of the general public within the walls of this was the work central principle. And it was different from the Sydney Football Stadium piece because it wasn't just one long piece. Like that was a long kind of, I think it's like 18 minutes and it rolls around. Whereas this is kind of like, I don't know, I think there's about 40 different sounds of all varying kind of duration in this. And it would sort of pick, although I did kind of slant it so that in the mornings you'd get more harp, because harp was the first thing I thought of this project. I was like, what do people need? They need harp. It's so beautiful. And anyway, so drawn from site-specific field recordings made in Martin Place on the metro train platforms and amongst functioning steam trains elsewhere, the composition allows different scenes to unfold across different times. There are human-made sounds, but also the land's cultural heritage, such as nature's pre-colonial symphony of magpies, butcherbirds, lyrebirds and owls. First Nations musicians improvise on violin and vocalise the land and sky country above, cementing their relationship to the area. So I had violinist Eric Avery, and he imagined trains moving through the landscape when he played his violin, and Nardi Simpson, who was vocalising land and sky country. And she was in a band called Stiff Gins, and we used to support them and play with them, like back in the 2000s. So I was like, hey, Nardi, got something for you. So woven into the soundscape are the sounds of transport from the past, drumming from me, soothing harp music from Emily Granger, who's in the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, to induce the more relaxed transit through space, and archival audio relating to Martin Place. So I listened to I went into the National Film and Sound Archive and I just listened to everything. I mean, I always, I kind of feel like I work a bit too much on these things. Like I went in and I listened to everything, and I watched all this kind of 16mm footage of performers in Martin Place, and there were like Greek milk bars and, lots of protests, and it was, Martin Place was a very busy area. So anyway, we have an undulating journey. I've put exclamation mark here because I hate the word journey. I think that's like a hangover from television. It's created from one end of the pedestrian tunnel to the other, offering an atmosphere of possibility and wonder. And because it doesn't exist I'll be running out of time. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards this time. So starting to record the elements, I started by drumming trains, of course. So I was down near Carriage Works drumming them every time they came near me. I don't think we ended up using too much of this, but it was fun. Couldn't get close enough, so I went to a steam train in Goulburn, a place called the Picnic Train. So there I was. Got a bit steamed out, trying to drum all its noises and parts. So, of course, I needed to get even closer, so I drummed on the train while it was moving. I've got a little sound for that one. Bob, getting some steam sounds. Then, the thing is you've got to I would just record everything outdoors everywhere, but sometimes you need to kind of be in a more controlled environment. So, Eric, he's an incredible improviser. Like, he's just, so everybody that I work with improvises. So it's the same way that I work. So it's all about just feeling where you are and creating something at that moment in time. Yeah, he was really mind-blowing, actually. So he's looking at the train there on the screen. Got that up there for him. And then Emily Granger. I took her onto the platform during the build. She wheeled her harp through the mess. She'd never done anything like this before. And I was saying to her, it was like, yeah, she'd gone from Carnegie Hall to Metro Martin Place platform. And the extraneous sounds, they were a bit of a nightmare for Bob, poor Bob. But, he's used to me now. And it was important for me to get the true impression and feeling about the sites. It's just one of those things. And it worked out a treat. It sounded fantastic. And she had a ball. And, she actually, that whole idea of everyone having to do this stuff in their safety gear too. It's just... chuck everything at it. Like I said to the methodology now seems to be getting highly skilled musicians to this. Happy, Nardi, I got her out into Martin Place to sing to Sky Country. That was pretty amazing. Also got her into the studio just to kind of get that kind of, again, more control. And then Bob and I are doing the final touches. So we'd done the mix, got all the bits, and then here we were. So I think I said that the earth life colours found in the sky, heavier on oranges, golds and blues. And because it's subterranean, I wanted that kind of outdoor, bringing the outdoor in, bringing ecology in, getting people to kind of go, oh yeah, I'm alive. I've heard that bird. Maybe I saw a magpie yesterday. It's highly likely people have been looking at their phones on the metro. We all know the news is pretty shit, so, I just want to kind of create like a circuit break for people. I think this was You know, I spend a lot of time in there watching people reacting to it. And, I mean, I'm a bit of a creep like that with my own work anyway. I go in and with my videos, I go and sort of see what people are reacting to. You know, it's kind of fun. Anyway, I think that's it. That is it.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Almost don't want to break that spell. And as the panellists come up, I just want to reflect for a moment the delicious contrast, tension between the way that, you know, an urban planner like me, and I can see many urban planners in the room, policymakers, you know, perhaps there's some bureaucrats amongst you. There's certainly people who have taught how to assess a development, you know, proposal. The way that we think about site and community and place, and the way that an artist thinks about those same things, and the poetry and the absolutely transformative experience that those commuters must have had walking through Martin Place and experiencing Sonic Luminescence. Congratulations, Tina. That was fabulous. And I'm going to allow you to catch your breath for a moment because I want to quiz our two other fantastic panellists here. And Michael, I'm going to throw you the first question actually, and ask you to reflect a bit on, you know, Tina's address and the, you know, ideas and the beautiful experiences actually that she treated us to. You know, I know I'm not the only person in the room who would have thought of public art as something that you see, actually, not even be thinking about public art as something that you listen. But certainly you're here as the director of this beautiful museum, and yet we are talking about art that is absolutely not inside museums. So given your career, and I know your career actually has been a lot about supporting artists beyond the museum, what do you think, you know, matters, or what do you think makes for, you know, doing that well and bringing about really powerful and impactful public art?
I just want to reflect on what something that Tina had said. Public art is not a solo activity, you know, and when people create public art, you know, there's the commissioner, there's stakeholders, there's a whole range of people. And I'd like to kind of go back to a time where I was involved with Campbelltown Hospital. So Campbelltown Hospital, there was a $654 million redevelopment of Campbelltown Hospital. And we had this amazing general manager who came to us early on and said, we would love to embed art within the hospital. And this was before the design stage. This is when they were doing the stack and block, which was really, really a great opportunity. You'd very rarely get an opportunity to work with the architect and work with the commissioner before, you know, the building is handed over to the architects. And so, you know, it was a fantastic opportunity where we engaged Nicole Monks, a First Nations artist, to work with the local community and embed First Nations knowledge within the hospital. And so we started with a few provocations. We went to the staff, we went to the patients, and we asked them what they wanted to see within the hospital. Also, what were we trying to solve? And so one of the things that came up really loud and clear for First Nations communities is they went to the AMS, the Aboriginal Medical Centre, but they didn't go to Campbelltown Hospital. So we wanted to create a welcoming space for First Nations people that they could seek healthcare within this hospital. And so Nicole Monks was charged with this opportunity to create spaces with the architect where First Nations people actually felt at home within the hospital. And so some of the opportunities that presented themselves were this idea of birth and death. So birth and death, you know, these high states of emotion exist within hospitals. But for a First Nations person, how did they experience that? And so when we were talking to the elders, they were talking about this idea of a yarning circle, but this place where when babies were born, they could be smoked and ceremony could happen, which within the existing hospital couldn't actually happen. So she kind of worked on that, and the idea of the lyrebird. So the lyrebird, is a totem for many Dharawal people, which the hospital's based on, Dharawal land, and trying to create these recognition points that we were on Dharawal land, and using the lyrebird as that main signifier. So in the end, it was a complicated work where she created this huge 7-metre lyrebird feather that continually moved, and just the complications are around having a soft fabric-based installation within a hospital that couldn't be reached or cleaned. Like all those people that work in public art will understand, the complexities around that. But it was a really, really great opportunity to work directly with the community, address issues that the hospital was facing, but then also kind of think about what the future could be for the hospital.
Thanks, Michael, and I'll come back to you again in a moment, but I actually wanted to bring you in, Enya. And look, you've done research here, you've done research overseas. What do you think, and reflecting a bit, of course, on what Tina has shared with us, but what do you think the significance is of public art projects, in relation to placemaking and community?
Yeah, I suppose I've come from doing research in Ireland in the last couple of years, a lot with socially engaged artists and kind of at the intersection of socially engaged art and public art. And what I find really interesting about Tina's work, and thank you for that amazing presentation, is kind of, I have reservations about always when I hear the word placemaking, because it suggests that you're making a place, whereas there's already a place existing there. And I think the value of Tina's work that she's presented is really that you're demonstrating what is already in existence, and you are taking the audience or the public along with you. So it's kind of driven by your own interest and your own experience and engagement with the site. Absolutely. And everything that's already existing there, as best as you can kind of examine and decipher it with other people in the community. And then it means that you're very generous then in kind of sharing and opening up that vision or idea to other people. So I think a lot of the time with public art projects, particularly in new precincts or urban developments, it's often, obviously developers want the place to have some artwork in it, and a lot of the time these places are made from a lot of concrete, and it makes it very difficult for people to connect with that place. And we find it a lot here with students, particularly international students who have arrived in Sydney, who don't really know much about the city, don't know much about Gadigal country, and don't have a real connection to this place. And they often find it quite hard to find that way in. And I think what's really interesting about your work in terms of that idea of placemaking is actually that you're exploring that and you're sharing that with other people.
Yeah, that level of research, Tina, and the layers of history that you uncovered and then brought to life with that sound work is really extraordinary, actually. I'm going to pivot now to something a little bit edgier and political, Michael, and I'm going to throw this to you. Do you think our policymakers recognise and support the arts in urban planning and in infrastructure investment?
Yes, they do, but they could do a lot more. I think government is probably the main framework that can actually impose a series of regulatory requirements that could create more public art. And I look out, I see local government colleagues, and I think at a local government level, there's a lot being done, but also there's a lot more that could be done. The Create New South Wales has a public art toolbox that everybody can use and everybody can implement, but they'll always get pushback from developers. They'll always get pushback from people where money is their main goal. So I think that government on all levels can play a major role in fostering great public art.
When you talk about regulation, we were yesterday in the Dank Street South precinct and heard about the development control plan that required a public art strategy right from the very beginning. So that's kind of what you're talking about. So in addition to funding regulation. I've got one more question for you, Enya, and this is the real invitations, probably a bit building on the political agitation thing, but with your research on public art and also cultural festivals, actually, we have a festival here, but cultural festivals are, huge in Australia, but also overseas. What do you think we could be doing better either in Sydney or in Australia?
Yeah, I think, well, speaking to Michael's point about funding and resourcing artists, I think the resourcing of artists in order to create work is really important, and it's not just, so obviously there's the financial resources, but also the time and the support that's required. So yes, artists need to have money and need to be paid in order to be able to produce this work. They also need time if you want genuinely, publicly, socially, community engaged work. And often the timeframes don't really reflect that. So those kind of longer timeframes actually enable artists to genuinely engage with communities, which actually feeds more into the ideas around public placemaking than just putting something in the space. So that time and temporal aspect, I think, is really important. And further, the support that's required for artists, because I think, as Tina mentioned, you have a background in social work and youth work. Like a lot of socially engaged artists that I know in Ireland also have those kind of backgrounds where the work is actually a lot of social work. And that's a lot to carry for an artist working in that space, and that kind of support isn't always made available to artists, and there's a lot of weight being put on them. And I would say that in relation to some of the policies that I've seen in Ireland, and it's not to say that everything's rosy and perfect in Ireland, but I think it is important to look at different places to see what kind of policies work, because often we've seen with the creative industries that policies get picked up and moved around that aren't exactly, they're not working in the ways that they're necessarily supposed to be, and they're treated as if they're universal, whereas those policies need to be very place specific. And a couple of initiatives in Ireland currently include the Pay the Artist policy, which has come out in recent years. And in the research that I did in the last couple of years, it was really evident to me, speaking to local organisers of community festivals, that they kept mentioning Pay the Artist, which is actually the title of the policy, but it meant that was embedded then in discourse around working with artists. There was no such thing as getting artists to do work for free or getting artists to be low paid, that was an important aspect of it. And further, they've started a pilot scheme for basic income for artists as well. So those kind of policies can actually really support and help practices of socially engaged work in the public realm.
Yeah, thank you. There's so much here. We're going to have to be talking about this all night, obviously. But Tina, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the room what you'd like to change about the planning and design process. I mean, you certainly mentioned a few issues in relation to sound, but...
I think it's just... it's like you're doing it first, whenever you're working on any of these things. you know, the tunnel was brand new. I mean, there were people, people would just turn up and go, who are you? You know, there's so many people involved in it that you can't possibly know everyone. You don't need to. But there is sort of, you know, suddenly I'd sort of get bits, I'd hear things and go, oh, I didn't know that was going on. But look, I don't really have a complaint. Like I was working with Macquarie and they had a fabulous team, and the woman that I was working with, Kate, she was really great. She listened. She really listened to everything and would respond very quickly if you had concerns or anything like that. But I think just with sound, like, yeah, everyone's surprised now that it's gone, okay? So it's not, it has a different sound is, you know, temporal by nature anyway. So I think it's just got this kind of, it's got an off button. The unfortunate thing that happened, and, you know, and they loved the work, but when the Sydney Football Stadium opened, they had their big opening day, I had to stop all my crew from going and my team because I heard that they'd put the DJ on top of the seats. And I was a bit like, I was, you know, pretty cranky about it. I was kind of like, well, you're silencing Indigenous voices. This is just really not on. And, but they loved it. They didn't really understand that they were doing something wrong. Okay, so I just don't think it's kind of there yet. It's like, I mean, you wouldn't throw a sheet over a sculpture, okay? But with sound, you do have a stop button. So I think it's just early days for its kind of, I don't know. I mean, there is sound art around, but I don't know. It just felt like it felt vulnerable. It had a vulnerability about it. And yeah, so it's there. It is there. But yeah, it plays like, apparently it plays, there was always like, you know, is it playing, is it not playing? And I think it's on sort of between 10 and 4. It's meant to be every 2 hours or something. But yeah, so that was kind of interesting. And then when I'm not sure I even knew that the tunnel wasn't going to be there for long when I started, actually, because I went into big mode. I was like, okay, you know, this big production. And then it sort of came up later, it might only be there for 6 months. I was like, oh, okay, you know, that's fine, whatever, you know. And then it ended up being a year. But now I'm not even sure what's there. They say it's not an artist, but it must be someone who's got some sort of skills. It's probably, pardon? Okay, so it's probably made sort of keyboard kind of, yeah, that's fine. It's just different. I mean, if you employ an artist, and not all artists will work like me either. You know, I work in a particular way because I have, you know, I do have a drumming sight practice. You know, that is one of the projects that I do in my practice. So that is why I'm able to have a language with a harp player or with Eric, or I actually am sort of part of that kind of new music thing. So I can have the language with them. I don't come at them without that. So I don't know. Look, yeah, it feels vulnerable. We'll see. They said it'll come back though, so I'll let everyone know when it comes back. Yeah.
It's your turn. I'm going to alternate. I've got some cracker questions here that have been submitted, but I really want to hear from the room. So put your hand up if you want to ask a question. We've got a roving mic or two. We do need to use mics, by the way. I'm going to throw to I'm going to use one of the first question will be one that was submitted, but put your hand up and I will send the mic to you in a moment. Michael, I'm going to throw you this one because it's juicy. It's by, I'm even going to out the questioner. I won't do this for everyone, but this is from Michael Cohen, and he says, everyone wants co-design in public art creation. Yes, we want co-design in everything, of course, but when reality bites, the box is ticked and people run for cover. Does participation in public art trump excellence?
As we've seen with Tina, no. So it always comes down to the quality of production, I think, when it comes to public art exhibitions, art making. You know, if the level of production isn't there, then it kind of lets down the whole process. But it's also the people that are driving it. You know, what is the idea of excellence? You know, if people are engaging with the work in a really, really deep way, then there's a level of excellence within that. So, yeah, I kind of struggled with that question a little.
Yeah. Does anyone else on the panel have an opinion? No, good. Excellent. I can see one question. Does anyone else have a question? And we've got one at the back. We'll go to this question here. Linda, I think Benny had her hand up, and then we've got one at the back.
It's just a question for Tina. I know that sound is an immersive experience, so I wanted to ask you how you experience your own soundscape creations that you've created with your team.
Well, when I knew it was finishing, I actually went and hung out there quite a lot and did a lot of the filming, and I went at different times of the day, and I love it. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah. The harp just gives me so much joy. It really does. The bird tracks, I love it. The morning birds, the nighttime birds, the crickets, there's crickets there. I mean, some stuff I listen to and I'm like, oh, that could have been slightly different. But no, I've got to love it. I'm not going to put anything out there I don't like. So yeah, I just make it as well as I can, And I work with Bob Scott, who's, he knows how to do things. So, we work together very closely and make sure that we, get it to absolute perfection, really. And I think there's 36 speakers in there, in the tunnel. So, yeah, we had to work hard. Yeah, but yeah, I love it. Like I sat in there and I was having a great time. And and probably looking like a real creep to some people, like, ooh, what's she doing in here sitting by herself with it? It gets cold in there too, so I was like kind of in my, had my beanie on. I was just sitting in there like a weirdo, just listening to it and loving it. So yeah, I mean, I like it.
All right.
Thank you. Just picking up on Michael Cohen's question, but some of the comments that Michael Dagostino made in Enya, I think we've got a bit of a disconnect with the way public art is engaged and built by developers, right? We have plenty of great examples of public art requirements being embedded to DCPs, requirements to spend 1% of a gross development value on public art. But there's kind of this disconnect where developers commission the art, it gets handed to the builder, there's a design process, it gets value engineered, and we don't necessarily end up with anything great, and there's a complete lack of co-design. We mandate liaison in large urban renewal precincts where public art is a mandatory requirement, but there is this disconnect with a lack of engagement to build it with communities. Is mandated co-design a way forward to resolve some of these issues with plonk art?
That's that first, and then we'll come to you, Michael.
Good old plonk art. I love that. Sorry, you'll have to. My brain was buzzing around. I have to say, it's a bit buzzy after everything today. So, what was that question in short?
Do you have a view about mandated public engagement? Is that the summary? Yeah. You think you have to mandate it?
I don't know.
All right, we're going to ask everyone. We're going to go to Michael and then
So I had a great experience when I was working at Parramatta Council. They just implemented a new public art strategy, and the person that was responsible, he was away, and so a developer gave me a call and said, what do you do around public art? And I said, you develop an arts plan and then you do this and then you do that. And he goes, can I just get school kids to come in and paint on the walls? And I was just like, no. But I think ultimately, probably the relationship between local government, because they're the ones that control the OCs in most cases, is there's a big opportunity for local government to play more of a role. And I know it's an expense on local government, but they can actually start kind of implementing, because also local government is closer than all other levels of government to the community. So local government, can play a major role in that.
Yeah, I guess there would be hesitation around kind of mandating things for fear that it's just going to reinforce those kind of box ticking exercises. However, without mandating, it doesn't necessarily give any incentive for developers to have to engage in a meaningful way. What I would say in relation to kind of the policies that I referenced earlier, these kind of policies and strategies that float around in environments around talking about placemaking or co-design, you know, there's lots of these models that are going around the place, and it's the ones that are available that are picked up and implemented. So I think actually genuinely creating ones that are genuine in public engagement is still really important. And another example that I've heard from an artist in Ireland recently is a project with Dublin City Council, where they're actually, it's called the Citizens Commission. And it also speaks to the fact that, you know, governments can implement the 1% scheme, and that doesn't mean that it's going to be more publicly engaged than something that a developer does. But this model is that it's a citizens commission, so it's Dublin City Council, and I wrote this down, Dolphin House, which is a social housing site that is quite historic in Dublin, and there's a very strong community there. And Create, which is the National Development Agency for Socially Engaged Art Practice in Ireland. And they have those three groups working together to set up a citizens commission, where it's actually a panel of community members who decide the briefing process, who decide what they actually want from the commission and what that commission is going to look like. So they're actually dividing up the 1% scheme into different bundles for different communities, and the communities get to decide and work with artists, or they get to work within their communities. So I think it's about finding better models that then are potentially mandated.
Very good. I'm going to, we've got a question here. I'll get the mic to you. And just let me know if you've got another question. Anyone else in the audience? Put your hand up.
It's interesting, the light and sound public art, but can public art be really taken seriously and accepted if after a year they can remove it? I mean, I don't understand how something can be gone to so much detail and we're all sitting here and say, well, it's not there anymore and there's something else. First of all, I don't know what's there. I remember seeing your work. First of all, I couldn't find out who did it, I mean, publicly. And it comes up with me a lot with this sort of public art. I don't know if it's still at the stadium or whatever, but sound and light can't be really taken seriously if it can then be switched off, surely.
Thank you.
At least a sculpture can't be removed.
Thank you.
Or whatever.
Yeah, I would like to ask firstly Tina to give her perspectives on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's just what I was saying. It's like, I mean, I don't think it lessens its seriousness.
It doesn't lessen the seriousness to you, or maybe art lovers, but it lessens the seriousness to governments or public bodies.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're really serious. We're giving 1%. Great, we've done it.
Yeah.
But actually, it's only going to last them. It's too hard to maintain, or I don't know what it costs to maintain these things.
Yeah, I think they just think people get sick of it.
Michael, do you have a perspective as a curator?
That's it.
I'm more interested in temporary public works and performances because they create these kind of really interesting experiences within the everyday, and public art can quickly fade and become like a chair or, you know, a tree, especially for people that are continually using that space. So the idea of kind of reinvigorating spaces through public art continually is a big opportunity.
Sounds expensive.
It is expensive. Everything's, it's about priority.
But sculptures don't get.
Okay, I'm going to have the microphone. This is so much, chat to do outside as well.
Tina, did you have a lot of freedom to do the Mulu Gilugu work? Okay, so how much did you resolve that at the competition stage? How much did you develop after? And you had total freedom?
Much. Yeah. I mean, look, no one even, it's just like, okay, off you go, bye. And we could do it, And I work with, so I have my team. I mean, I didn't have a, it was already there, so we didn't need kind of engineers really and all that sort of stuff. So I was working with my sound person, my lighting person, and he was only there for a short while kind of thing. So look, it pretty much ended up how I thought it would, strangely. It's just like, I can get that, and I get that, do that, and then whew, presto, magic. There wasn't kind of there wasn't any testing stuff. I mean, they came in, I think they had to listen to some of the stuff in studio, but not overly, no. I think there's probably because I'd done another one too, and previous work had shown that I was capable. So there was, I guess they just sort of trusted me in a way to do it, and I think, I mean, it worked for that. And yeah, I don't know what they could have said to me that would have, would have changed anything or helped or, Does that sort of answer? Yeah. I mean, it's just, it was just like, okay, I see it like this. Oh, it's like this. Yeah, so I was lucky like that.
Sorry, did I see a hand over there? Yes, okay, thanks.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the question of temporary public art or not. And I totally agree with you, Michael. Having temporary artworks is just so invigorating for public spaces. But I have to say, with Tina's work, I thought your work in the tunnel was just the most glorious public artwork I've seen in Sydney. And I think that the way that you talked about how you approached making it be an experience that people would experience anew every day was just such a beautiful way of making an artwork that was different all the time. Yeah. You know, the algorithm that you created and all of that to make the work current. And I mean, I think that, you know, if an artist is, you know, skilled as you is chosen for a public space, then you know, you can see that a permanent work could be forever in the sense of just being created anew all the time. So I think that, anyway, I just think what you've done was absolutely masterful.
Thank you. I don't think that I'm not sort of going, oh, it should be there forever, or I don't feel, I'm like, okay, well, that was that decision, and other people are actually more upset about it than me, which has kind of made me sort of think, oh, okay. But it's true, like sometimes I don't know how hard I work, though, like I work hard and something happens and suddenly it's gone. It's kind of, I suppose, I think for something like this, I could just add to it or change the algorithm or do something if that's what, you know. If someone said, oh, not that violin again. But, you know, like I think it's got enough sounds in it. Yeah, it kind of covers everything, really.
Oh, we've got a question at the front, and as the mic goes, I'm just going to make the comment that I hear Michael saying, you know, we want to have lots of public art, but there are so many public spaces that could accommodate more, you know, public art in the city.
I guess this question's for Tina as well. I think, in my impression, that art hasn't been taken quite seriously, because if it has, people would actually realize that to do art, you need a lot of knowledge to deliver it, and the knowledge is not necessarily calculated. It's a lot to do with your practice, your lived experience, and all that intuition that comes from it. So I guess the comment is that, I guess it's that, I think maybe it's because of that stigma or maybe that kind of bias that we don't see a lot of integration of art in a lot of the public spaces, whether it's architecture, planning. I mean, interior design, it's personal, but I think in the public space, it's quite undermined and overlooked.
Yeah, thank you.
Look, we're going to need to draw it to a close. I'm going to draw it to a close by exercising my prerogative to choose one of the fabulous questions here and throw it to each of the panellists. And it's simply this, and we might start with you, Enya. What's your favourite piece of public art and why?
Yeah, I suppose thinking about people that I've been working with over the last few years and socially engaged artists in particular, there was an artwork that like really for me tests the I guess concept of public art, and that was a project by two artists, Fiona Whelan and Phelim Cannon in Dublin, who worked with Housing Action Now, which is a housing rights organisation. And it started during COVID, where it was essentially a series of workshops that was talking about the concept of home in relation to housing rights. And what they ended up developing was a kind of like a dramatized script that spoke to the challenges of people who were facing homelessness. And they dramatized it as kind of this apology from the Irish state to people for the housing crisis. And the public aspect of that work in the end was that they worked with a senator who is in the Senate in Ireland, Shannon Aaron, who read it into public record, so that that artwork and that creative process actually exists in the National Archives through the public record. And I think the value of it was underscored by the fact that the Arts Council of Ireland actually purchased the work as well. And it really demonstrated how, particularly in a festival that's Festival of Urbanism, thinking about like how that community engaged work, how that practice of socially engaged artists, and how working with communities can actually create something that's really long-lasting in the public space. So I think that's one of my favorite
example. Thank you. Tina?
Oh, look, I guess mine's sort of, yeah, can't say my own. McDonald. Oh, look, it's hard for me to have favourites of anything. It just changes all the time. But I guess it's, I don't know Callum Morton, but I do love that little hotel in Melbourne on the expressway. I think it's just, again, that's sort of my thing of like immediately seeing something that's not supposed to be there. It's, do people know it? It's about, it's been there since 2008 or something. I think it's like, I don't know, 20 metres high and 12 metres wide, and little lights go on at night sometimes. And so it's been there for a long time. But for me, it's just it's like an instant sugar hit. If you're in your car, you're like, what is that? What's going on there? And it's humorous. There's actually humour in it, which I think, considering the way the world's going, it's okay to have a little bit of humour in things. It's like a sight gag as you're driving past, and I kind of appreciate that, And it's a bit like, it's not dissimilar to, I was in Texas going to Marfa, and you go past the Prada store, so it's a similar idea. So you've got this like little Prada store out in the middle of nowhere, and it's delightful, it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And you just sort of go in and have a look, and there's some shoes there, some of them have got a few bugs on them. It's been there for a long time. But I think it's just I am sort of, I would love, that project sounds amazing, but I guess sometimes I just want that sugar hit, that instant, whoa, look at that. And I don't have to be versed up in art to like it, or I can just get a bit of a thrill from it. And I think that's what both those things do. And scale is always fun. You just make a huge building really small, or, it's just an easy way of kind of, making people happy.
Yeah, great. And Michael?
Megan Cope's Kinyangara, the poles that she developed for Stradbroke Island. So essentially it was 150 poles that had oysters, young oysters that she kind of situated back into Kondamuka country. To talk back to this idea of, oyster harvesting always happened there and then it stopped, and how could she play a role in actually kind of invigorating those oyster, not farms, but those oyster sites. And I've seen it, in a variety of places. There was a situation where it was exhibited at the Opera House, but one of the most amazing moments was at Chau Chak for the Chau Chak Biennale. She exhibited in this place which was a desert, but it used to be an ocean. And to see these kind of oyster poles which existed in an ocean, thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, that was now a desert, was this kind of beautiful gesture. Yeah.
Thank you. Look, this has been an incredible conversation. It doesn't have to end. We've, got drinks for you all to continue it outside. I want to thank you. Great audience, great questions in advance, great questions tonight. But of course, our fantastic panel and our absolutely extraordinary artist, keynote speaker, Tina Havelock Stephens. Thank you.